Egypt slams malicious propaganda, dismissing its Gaza support as illogical. Hamas submits real and positive response to Israel's ceasefire proposal. And a Russian Antonov An-24 crashes near Tinder, killing all 48 aboard, including 6 crew and 5 children. Good evening and welcome to our 8 o'clock bulletin here at Q News. I'm Mark Summers. Egypt has strongly denounced what it described as a malicious propaganda targeting its role in supporting the Palestinian cause, calling recent accusations illogical and dismissing of its efforts since the start of Israel's war on Gaza. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry reaffirmed that Egypt has never closed the Rafah crossing from its side, blaming Israeli occupation forces for blocking access on the Palestinian side. The ministry warned of disinformation campaigns aimed at demoralizing Arab public opinion and undermining the Palestinian cause. Egypt pledged to support humanitarian support for Gaza and work toward a ceasefire, facilitate reconstruction and pursue political efforts towards a two-state solution. The Jordanian Hashemite charity organization, in partnership with World Central Kitchen and the World Food Programme, has sent a convoy of aid supplies to Gaza. The convoy was seen departing from Amman, carrying much-needed relief to the besieged Palestinian enclave. Gaza faces a worsening hunger crisis, with dozens reportedly starving to death in recent weeks. The World Health Organization reported that 21 children under 5 have died from malnutrition this year alone. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has said it cannot verify how much aid is awaiting distribution at Gaza's border crossings due to the lack of access granted by Israel. OCHA spokesperson Jens Lerker said Israel has not allowed the UN to be present at the crossings. Lerker stressed that as the occupying power, Israel must ensure aid reaches civilians safely, warning that principled delivery cannot take place at scale under current conditions. UNRWA Chief Felipe Lazzarini has warned of a deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, stating that famine silently begins to unfold as child malnutrition rises and families are unable to cope. Parents are too hungry to care for their children, Lazzarini said on X, noting that even those who reach clinics lack the energy or means to follow medical advice. He added that 6,000 aid trucks are currently waiting in Jordan and Egypt, calling for unrestricted and uninterrupted access to deliver humanitarian assistance to Gaza. At least 79 Palestinians, including 23 aid seekers, were killed and 453 injured in Israeli attacks across Gaza in the past 24 hours. Additionally, 10 bodies were recovered from a previous attack from rubble. Since October the 7th, 2023, the death toll from Israel's war on Gaza has reached 59,587, with 143,498 injured. The ministry also said 1,083 aid seekers have been killed since May 27th under Israel's new aid restrictions, with over 7,275 injured. Hamas has submitted a real and positive response to Israel's ceasefire proposal. Bishara Barbar, a mediator involved in indirect negotiations in Doha, called on Israel to engage in quick and serious negotiations to end the conflict and bring relief to Gaza, where civilians continue to suffer heavy casualties and shortages. Sources have told our sister news channel, Al Qahira News, that 180 humanitarian aid trucks entered the Gaza Strip since yesterday until early this morning from the Zakim crossing in the north and the Kerem Abu Salem crossing. The sources explained that the shipments included food supplies, flour and medical equipment as part of ongoing relief efforts to alleviate the suffering of civilians in the Strip. Hamas has accused the international community of being a silent witness to the systematic starvation of Palestinians in Gaza. In a statement on Telegram, the group called the policy a crime by the Israeli government and urged Western nations to stop arming Israel and hold it accountable. Hamas also demanded urgent UN action to ensure unrestricted aid entry into Gaza, warning that civilians face death from hunger and thirst if the blockade continues. Israel's Knesset Finance Committee has approved nearly $275 million in funding for transport infrastructure in the occupied West Bank. The Times of Israel reported far-right Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich praised the move as a step toward de facto sovereignty and expanding settlements. The funding aims to physically and politically link the territory to Israel, further undermining prospects for a Palestinian state. Israeli Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu has stated that the government is racing ahead to wipe out Gaza and intends to settle Jews throughout the territory. All Gaza will be Jewish, Eliyahu said, adding that Jewish towns will not be fenced in inside cantons. His comments come amid growing international concern over the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Red Crescent has declared that Gaza is facing a severe man-made starvation crisis caused by an ongoing Israeli blockade and restricted humanitarian access. A spokesperson reported that over 100 people, including 80 children, have died from starvation. Hospitals in Gaza are overwhelmed with patients suffering from severe malnutrition. The Red Crescent is calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and unrestricted humanitarian access to prevent further loss of life. Desperation grew in Gaza as Palestinians lined up at soup kitchens amid the worsening hunger crisis. Local health authorities say dozens have died of starvation in recent weeks. Israel, which sealed off Gaza in March and reopened access under tight controls in May, insists it allows sufficient aid in but accuses militants of diverting supplies. It also blames the UN for slow distribution. The United Nations, however, says it is doing all it can under restrictive Israeli conditions. Over 2.2 million residents remain at risk as aid struggles to reach those most in need. Gaza's government media office has said that the enclave urgently needs at least 500,000 bags of flour weekly to prevent a humanitarian collapse. Hospitals have reported over 115 deaths from famine and malnutrition amid a near-total Israeli blockade. It urged the international community to break the siege, fully open crossings, and allow essential aid, including baby milk, to reach the 2.4 million people trapped in Gaza. Leading international news agencies AFP, AP, Reuters and the BBC have jointly called on Israel to permit journalists to enter and exit Gaza amid the strict blockade. In a statement, the groups expressed deep concern for their reporters trapped in Gaza, struggling to provide for themselves and their families. They reiterated their urgent plea for Israeli authorities to ensure safe passage for media personnel in and out of the territory. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has said the U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is traveling to Europe to meet with key regional leaders to advance a ceasefire in Gaza and secure the release of detainees held by Hamas.
Good afternoon, everybody.
In Rome, Witkoff has held talks with Israeli and Qatari officials, with potential travel to Doha later in the week to finalize an agreement. That's according to reports by Axios. Leavitt emphasized that both President Trump and Witkoff are committed to achieving a ceasefire and freeing detainees as soon as possible.
Special Envoy Witkoff last night about them. I will let him speak further on the matter, but the President and Special
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has called for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, condemning what he described as the greatest humanitarian catastrophe of our time. Abbas urged U.S. President Donald Trump to intervene and allow UN agencies to deliver food and medical aid to the besieged territory. He denounced the killing and starvation of civilians near aid centers as a stain on the international community. Abbas also rejected forced displacement and called for full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and international recognition of the state of Palestine. He warned that the imposition of Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank is a dangerous escalation and called for unity under the Palestine Liberation Organization. More than 60 European Parliament members have called for an emergency meeting with EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas to push for sanctions and an arms embargo on Israel. The MEPs condemned the ongoing Israeli attacks in Gaza, highlighting over 1,000 deaths at aid sites. In a letter, they criticized the recent EU-Israel aid agreement as ineffective and urged immediate action to address the worsening humanitarian crisis. They also called for sanctions against Israel, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and related individuals, and demanded stronger lobbying for an EU arms embargo on Israel. Israel has confirmed that eight soldiers were injured in a suspected car ramming attack near the West Bank city of Kfar Yona. 2 soldiers sustained moderate injuries while 6 were lightly hurt. All were taken to hospital and their families have been informed. Hamas called the attack a natural response to Israel actions against Palestinians. The vehicle involved was found in the occupied West Bank, where a manhunt is ongoing. Israel's parliament, the Knesset, approved a non-binding motion to impose Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank, voting 71 to 13 in favor. The West Bank, a 5,600 square kilometer territory captured by Israel during the 1967 Middle East War, has been under military occupation since. Palestinians see it as a core part of a future independent state, but it has increasingly been divided by Israeli settlements, now home to around 700,000 Israelis. Most countries consider these settlements illegal under international law, though Israel disputes this. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry has condemned Israel's parliament vote to impose sovereignty on the occupied West Bank, labelling it colonial and racist. The ministry said the Knesset's decision underscores the improbability of Israel reversing its occupation plans or supporting a two-state solution. It called for international sanctions to pressure Israel against committing further crimes against the Palestinian people. France has announced that it will co-chair an international meeting with Saudi Arabia next week at the United Nations to rescue the two-state solution. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot stated that the prospects for establishing a Palestinian state are more threatened than ever as Gaza suffers from famine and destruction.
Please. Yeah. Pleasure. Good to see you. Welcome. Closer.
Now, buses crossed a checkpoint near Suwaida in southern Syria to evacuate civilians amid escalating sectarian clashes between the Druze minority and the Syrian Bedouin tribes. Fierce fighting also erupted between Druze armed individuals and government forces, resulting in over 300 deaths. The violence drew in Israel, which carried out airstrikes last week targeting southern Syria and Damascus, citing protection of its Druze community. On Friday, Israel and Syria agreed to a ceasefire brokered with support from Turkey, Jordan and neighboring countries, aiming to stabilize the volatile region.
We're trying to make a deal so that there's no destruction and death.
Iran has warned a U.S. Navy destroyer to change course near its territorial waters, but a U.S. defense official downplayed the encounter, calling it safe, professional, and without impact on the mission. Iranian state media released footage showing a helicopter approaching the USS Fitzgerald, with audio of a warning reportedly issued by Iranian forces. The U.S. official dismissed the claim as misinformation from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabedi stated that Tehran is ready to resume nuclear talks with Washington, provided certain principles are respected. Garibabedi added that negotiations could resume if there is recognition of Iran's rights under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, efforts by Washington to rebuild trust with Tehran, and guarantees that the talks will not lead to renewed military action against Iran. The White House has confirmed that President Trump intends to keep the authority to make final decisions on sanctions against Russia. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump had been closely involved in the conflict and maintains that as Commander-in-Chief, sanction decisions rest with him. Despite his earlier public dispute with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Trump has recently mended ties and voiced increasing frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
That authority and that right to himself. Jasmine.
Thanks, Caroline. Two questions for you. The first one, AI.
Ukraine has secured the return of another group of prisoners of war from Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky announced this brings the total number of returned soldiers under a recent deal to over 1,000. Writing on Telegram, Zelensky said many of the returning troops were seriously wounded or ill, with some having spent more than 3 years in captivity. The exchange was part of an ongoing negotiation held in Turkey. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that he will propose new legislation to the Verkhovna Rada aimed at reinforcing the law enforcement system and eliminating Russian interference. Zelensky emphasized that the bill will ensure the full independence of anti-corruption institutions, maintaining all necessary standards to protect their autonomy. Acknowledging public concerns voiced on social media and in daily conversations, the president said the government has carefully analyzed these issues to implement meaningful changes. Zelensky concluded with a call for national unity and peace, stating his vision for Ukraine to end the war and secure its rightful place as a member of Europe.
Усі почули те, що кажуть люди цими днями. Що кажуть люди в соціальних мережах?
A Russian Antonov An-24 aircraft crashed while preparing to land near Tinder in Russia's Far East, killing all 40 people on board, including 6 crew and 5 children. The nearly 50-year-old Soviet-era plane, operated by regional airline Angara, was flying from Blagoveshchensk when it vanished from the radar. Rescue teams reached the crash site in a remote forested area using heavy machinery. Authorities have launched a criminal investigation into potential violations of air safety rules. Turkey has revealed its first domestically developed hypersonic missile, the Typhoon Block 4, at the International Defence Industry Fair in Istanbul. Produced by Roketsan, the hypersonic missiles, capable of exceeding speeds of Mach 5, are a focus of global defence innovation, with the US, China and Russia also advancing similar technologies. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi signed a major free trade agreement, calling it a historic moment for both nations. The deal, finalised after years of negotiations, cut tariffs on goods like whiskey, cars and textiles and boost market access. It's expected to increase UK-India trade by £25.5 billion UK pounds sterling, that's around $34 billion US dollars, by 2040. Modi said the two countries will work together from AI to semiconductors, while Starmer called the agreement signed, sealed and ready to be delivered. The pact will take effect after ratification.
Pockets of working people to wages and hundreds of millions of pounds to regions and nations up and down the United Kingdom.
It is our commitment that
Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has criticized what she called German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's increasingly militant rhetoric and the forced militarization of Germany, calling it a worrying development for both Russia and German citizens. Although diplomatic channels between Russia and Germany remain open, the Russian Foreign Ministry expressed concern over what it sees as a steady rise in anti-Russian rhetoric from German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said Berlin's current approach risks further escalating tensions between the two countries. US President Donald Trump is set to announce a comprehensive new plan to strengthen the United States' position in artificial intelligence during the Winning the AI Race Summit this afternoon. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump considers U.S. leadership in AI non-negotiable and that the plan aims to sustain America's global dominance in the field. The strategy focuses on securing national security, boosting economic growth, and maintaining technological superiority. Trump will also sign 3 executive orders related to AI at the event, underscoring the administration's commitment to this key area amid increasing competition with China for AI supremacy.
Future for all Americans, massively grow our economy and protect.
The International Court of Justice has ruled that countries are legally required to meet their climate obligations under the Paris Agreement. The court stated failure to do so is an internationally wrongful act that could lead to legal responsibility, including stopping harmful actions and providing reparations. The court stressed that nations must show their highest ambition in cutting emissions. The ruling supports vulnerable states seeking accountability for climate harm and could lead to future lawsuits.
To question A, constitute an internationally wrongful act entailing.
Police in Cyprus have confirmed the discovery of 2 bodies inside a burnt-out car following a massive wildfire that scorched more than 100 square kilometres of forest in the Troodos mountain region. The fire, which erupted earlier this week on the southern slopes of the island, has destroyed numerous homes and forced the evacuation of at least 14 villages. More than 100 evacuees are being sheltered, and in some cases, escape routes were blocked by advancing flames. In Lofu village, at least 20 homes were lost, and a group of evacuees had to turn back after their exit route was cut off. 10 firefighters lost their lives and 14 injured while fighting a wildfire in Turkey's central Eskişehir province. The firefighters were trapped after a sudden wind shift pushed flames toward them in the district. Despite attempts to escape uphill, they could not outrun the fire. While 7 wildfires continue to burn across central and western Turkey. Athens has experienced extreme temperatures, with thermal imaging confirming the city enjoyed intense heat amid an ongoing heat wave. Temperatures have consistently surpassed 40 degrees, leading to the temporary closure of landmarks like the Acropolis during the hottest midday hours. While Greece's sunny summers draw millions of tourists annually, climate change is causing longer, more intense heat waves, alongside increased risks of floods and wildfires. Heavy rains from Storm Wipha caused severe flooding in central Vietnam, submerging houses and forcing residents in the Nay An province to use boats to navigate their neighborhoods. Authorities forecast up to 50 centimeters of rain and warned of landslides and urban flooding, placing around 350,000 soldiers on standby. Vietnam's long coastline makes it vulnerable to deadly typhoons, with last year's Typhoon Yagi causing nearly 300 deaths and $3.3 billion in damages. Now, a humanoid robot named Abby is bringing comfort and companionship to elderly residents in Australian aged care homes. aiming to ease the growing problem of social isolation. Developed by Melbourne-based startup Andromeda Robotics, Abby stands just over a metre tall with a colourful design and a friendly, childlike personality. The robot uses advanced language models and machine vision to recognise faces, remembering past conversations and engaging residents in 90 languages. Designed in collaboration with care professionals, Abby has been in use since September 2023, helping support staff amid a growing worker shortage in the sector.
I'm just here to make your day a bit more fun.
There's Abby there. Now, just before we go, let's get a recap on the main headlines this evening. Egypt slams malicious propaganda, dismissing its Gaza support as illogical. Hamas submits real and positive response to Israel's ceasefire proposal. And a Russian Antonov An-24 crashes near Tinder, killing all 48 on board, including 6 crew and 5 children. And that's our news bulletin for this evening. If you'd like some more news, you can go to our social media platforms at Qnews EGY 24 hours a day to help stay informed. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening.